Welcome to a special edition of Powerful Women Today. Do you know what the 5 key elements of a contract are? As business women, we sign contracts every single day, even without realizing we're entering into a contract. We have a very special guest today, Marlene Doss from Doss Law,
Hi.
one of our Powerful Women Today mentor experts and overall incredible champion of women's empowerment. Welcome, Marlene.
Thank you very much, Carolina. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. One of the things about contracts that is just so important for women business for women in general, right? I'm thinking two things. One is that it's very easy to get into, very hard to get out of.
Mhm.
And also, sometimes we don't realize that we're entering into a contract or that both parties understand the the meaning of the contract or how
Mhm.
involved the contract is or the legality of it. And
Mhm.
I think women, I see it every day. I speak to a lot of women entrepreneurs and women at large, and we're such creatures of collaboration, right? That we all want to work together, and we're so excited, and we kind of get like to it right away. But there's a lot of things that need to be considered when you are entering into a contract. And
Mhm.
today, you are going to guide us through the 5 requirements for a contract to be legal and for a contract to be binding. And what does it look like? And because the terminology is always different, or somebody may copy a contract from someone else and use it for themselves, and they don't realize the terms that they're either implying or agreeing to. So
Mhm.
let's go through it, and you're going to tell all of our audience what to look for and what does it look like in real life.
Mhm.
So let's start at the beginning with legal intent. What does that mean?
So the intent of is the parties. It's exactly what it sounds like. Your intention to enter into an agreement together, where you're saying party A and party B, or company A and company B, are agreeing to do something together, whatever it is.
Okay.
So the intent is basically the purpose behind it, right?
Okay.
Um, why are you putting this down on paper, and what do you look to accomplish at the end of the fulfillment of this agreement?
Correct. In contracts, sounds to me, right? Contract sounds very big, like when you are, buying a house, or when you
Mhm.
are, you know, doing something major. But the reality is that contracts occur even at the back of your invoice,
Mhm.
whatever the terms and conditions are. Is that a contract?
Well, the contract is sort of before you get to that
Okay.
point where of your invoicing, right? Invoicing is
Okay.
you're giving the fees for the work that has been performed,
So
right?
it's the proposal. Whenever you make the proposal and somebody agrees to it,
Yes,
that is the contract.
right. I mean,
Okay.
at the end of the day, it should be that whatever the intentions of the parties are, this is
Mhm.
what we're negotiating, this is what we're discussing, and then we're agreeing to put it down in paper, right?
Okay.
So the contract itself is going to outline when do these obligations begin, when do they
Mhm.
end, if there is an end date, right?
Okay.
Often at the beginning of the contracts, you'll have what we call the preambles. So it says,
Mm.
whereas party A and party B want to do this business venture together, whereas party A does this kind of a business, or is this person of an individual, or provides these services, and party B wants to use party A to do these services, or
Mhm. It's like an
whatever the
executive
terms.
summary at the beginning
Exactly.
that kind
Yes.
of encapsulates what is it that you're trying to accomplish,
Right.
right?
Yes. So
Okay.
in the agreement of purchase and sale, it would say, here's the buyer, here's the seller, this is the property that they're talking about in this agreement that's going to be purchased, sold for X amount of money, etc. And then you get into the rest of the terms of the agreement, right?
Okay. All right. Now that we understand, we have our executive summary, we know, what we're trying to accomplish, it comes to the offer.
Hmm.
And, would you like to, right?
Yes.
But the problem with contracts is that they're often written in legalese, in a lot of lingo, in a lot of technical language that is not
Mhm.
always clear. So in real life, what does the offer look like? Most of the time, I realize this, unique basis, but what are the tips that tell you this is the offer? This is what you're looking for.
So it usually outlines what each party is going to be doing as a part of this agreement, right? So let's say somebody is contracting me out to
Mhm.
provide some legal services, right? So we would give them the retainer fee. Our
Okay.
retainer fee would be this contract between us
Mhm.
and the client, right?
Okay.
So we would say at the beginning, we would say where you have asked us to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G for you,
Mhm.
right? And it would it would state this is what we're agreeing to provide to you
Mhm.
in this agreement. It would also say what's not included, right? If you need to.
Oh,
So if you wanted
very
to,
important.
if you wanted to specify things outside, right, which we sometimes do, we say this is what we're going to provide for you at this fee or this hourly rate.
Mhm.
Anything outside of the scope that's described here is going to be discussed.
Yeah.
And it
And
might be up for other fees, etc.
that
Right?
is so important. I think what
Hmm.
is not included is as important as what you're writing that is included.
Yes,
Because you don't want anybody to assume, right? Like
that's
anything
right.
or implied that something is part of something, right?
That's
Like,
right.
and I go back to houses because it's an example that we all can relate to, right? You often see in the purchase of a house that somebody would say curtains not included,
Yes,
appliances not included, or this is
that's right.
included, and it's
That's right.
very, very specific. So
Mhm.
watch out for what's not there
That's
as
right.
much as what is there. Great
That's
tip.
right.
Thank you so much. Next part of contract is acceptance.
Hmm. So acceptance is once both parties sign it,
Mhm,
right? So if the parties going back to the offer,
mhm,
as we're saying, what you want to make sure is there is the specific details. It doesn't matter once you're putting it down in paper. It really doesn't matter what you've discussed beforehand. Okay,
oh,
it's
okay.
really it's really important that once you're putting it down in paper, that the paper reflects all your discussions and all your
Mhm.
agreements. You don't want something to be missed and implied and suggested. And well, we had said that providing this service will include this on the outside or whatever it is, right? So you want to make sure that what you're putting down in paper actually does include and exclude everything that you do want it to have there, right?
Okay. So usually when you begin to negotiate, right?
Hmm.
You begin by saying, giving a quote,
Hmm.
right? And those are the preliminary discussions, right? So you
Yes.
may have a quote, but then you need to make sure that when that quote becomes a contract,
Hmm.
that everything that was on the quote is identical to what's on the contract,
That's
right?
right. Nothing more, nothing less.
Because even if it's on the quote but not on the contract, you're going to go by what's on the contract. Is that what?
Right.
Am I understanding this right?
Yes, because sometimes
Okay.
even in the quote, the fee might be one thing, but in the contract, what you've put in as the fees and what you've agreed to should factor in any additions or any exclusions that you have
Yeah.
discussed and agreed since the quote was provided, if
That
there
is
was a
so
quote, right?
important. I never thought of it. And also any hidden fees,
That's right.
right? That may be that are not discussed. And
Hmm.
things like any conditions,
That's
right?
right.
Like in order because the quote is the quote. The quote's very preliminary, right? Like you said,
Hmm.
emails or conversations or Zoom calls and all these things, right? That you
Hmm.
understood something to be. But when you're actually signing that legally binding contract,
Hmm.
right, you need to look out for everything that you had the conversation or everything that you understood. And at that point you can still negotiate. No, you're still in the offer and acceptance. Isn't there still
Yes.
room, without it being and not that there's any specific rules, but without it being completely unacceptable or unheard of, right? For you to
Yes.
go back and say, you know what, can we add these or can we
That's right.
clarify these, or like make sure that you're 100% happy because this is what you're getting.
That's
Right.
right. Before the
Okay.
point of signing,
Mhm.
anything is on the table, right? So often these contracts are drawn up by whichever party uh, wants to take that process. And
Correct.
once it's drawn up, you give it to the individual to review and say, hey, is anything missing? Do we need to add anything? Do we need to take anything out? Was there anything, that's not clear here that you would like to clarify, etc. Right? Then you
Yeah.
present it to the other side and they have their chance to say, we agree to these terms. No, we don't agree. You forgot this part. You forgot whatever. You amend it, right?
Yeah.
So until it's signed by both parties, it's not a binding agreement.
Okay.
Now, you take that with a grain of salt in case, work has already begun and things like that. There's some
Oh, that
factors
is
that might
very
come into
important.
play.
Thank you for
Mhm,
saying that, because if I recall correctly from my years in corporate, there was something about implied acceptance,
mhm.
which means that if you allow the work to begin and you still haven't finalized your contract, you're technically, am I right in that you're technically accepting the terms of the contract? How does that work?
It's very fact based. So
Okay.
it depends on the circumstances, right? Like if the work
Mm.
has begun, you've allowed the work to begun, then yes, clearly there is some sort of an exchange that's happening,
Mhm.
right? Some work is
Some
being
kind of
performed and it's
acceptance.
assumed. Yes, but one party could be under the understanding that, this work is being performed for free until we enter into this
Oh my
agreement
goodness.
as some sort of goodwill, right? So you want, I mean, even if you're going to do that, you want some sort of
Mm.
paper trail, emails or something that kind of confirms that one way or the other, right?
Yeah. So starting
Um,
to offer services before your client has signed the agreement or the contract is not a good idea.
it's no, it's
That you need
no.
to know when the clock begins, right? You need to
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, you
Very
want the meeting of the
yeah,
minds, right? You want both people to come in and agree that this is what we're agreeing to do, and this
that's
is
right.
the fees that are going to be exchanged for it, etc.
Mm.
Right? So that there's no coming back later and saying that I didn't know. And often
Yeah.
when you're writing these contracts, there is the legalese that you're speaking of. It comes in the end where it says anything that's not in this document is
Mhm.
not binding, right? So
Oh,
that
wow.
relates to anything that has been spoken about but not included in,
Mhm.
right?
And,
Because in the discussions and stuff, sometimes one party's like, yeah, and we'll do this and we'll do this. And then they think about it and they're like, maybe we won't. That's going to be too much for the fees that we're charging or whatever it is. And they intentionally exclude it from the contract, right?
and
So if the other party
especially
signs it,
when there's things like disbursements, like any
yes,
consumables that are not included, that,
that's right.
that if I need to, like if I'm a web designer and I need to purchase domains, or I need to do anything
Right.
out of pocket that is not included, that the client perhaps was supposed to take care of it, but they didn't. And now you're having to take care of it for them to understand that there could be additional charges, and everything
Yes.
you need to leave a little bit of wiggle room, right? That
Mhm.
says to make sure that everyone is happy and to make sure that everybody feels good about the relationship, right? Because
Mhm.
these contracts, if they're not written right, that's where it
Mhm.
begins, right? If they're not written right or they're not understood right, can
Yeah.
jeopardize entire relationships. You can have relationships that have been solid and active for years and then
Mhm.
have it all fall apart because of a misunderstanding, right? Of
Right.
what things meant.
Yes.
Now, is this at the point where each party, well, one person had already had the contract done, but the person receiving, just
Mhm.
before they accept, they should get independent legal advice.
Yes.
This is at the
Usually
point,
both
right?
parties, usually each party has their own lawyer when we're
Yes.
preparing contracts, right? Unless somebody decides not to be represented. But yes,
Yeah.
each party should have their own lawyer as we're negotiating the contracts, as we're whatever, depending on how complex um,
Yeah. Like it's,
the situation is.
you
But
don't kill flies with baseball bats, right?
yeah,
But it is, you do have to know, um, you know, start at the beginning, right? Even having just someone take a quick review, right?
Mhm.
It actually doesn't cost a lot, and it all has to be in proportion. If you're entering into a, you know $500,000. Like, you need to think how material this is, right?
Mhm.
If you're entering into something that, like, and I keep going back to websites. I'm not even a website designer, but
Yes.
I just know, I've witnessed enough problems with website design, right? With
Yes.
interpretation, with it's so subjective. When is it finished? When is it that you've achieved the look that you want, right? And
Mhm.
then you need to actually specify, you are entitled to so many revisions, and
Mhm.
cut it off, right? Because otherwise it's like, is this blank check that you're kind of issuing as to when is it ready, when is it
Mhm.
fixed, right?
Yes.
So it's
Yes.
so important to have your contracts drawn up with a lawyer, like if you're the service provider. And this is a one-time cost, unless your services keep changing, right?
Mhm.
You have your template, and then you keep using that template again and again and again with all your clients.
That's
Even
right.
if it is like a non-disclosure, I had non-disclosure agreements prepared, in our membership agreements prepared by a lawyer, and
Mhm.
then you just keep reusing them, right?
Mhm.
And unless something fundamental changes, you can just keep reusing it. But from the
That's right.
receiving end, you do need to make sure that, basically, what are you able to afford to lose, right? Because once you've
Mhm.
signed a contract, in some contracts you get into, without even realizing. Like, I signed a contract with our cable provider for our office, right? And it
Mhm.
was such a great deal. And then we realized, we're really not using these. Like, after months of, their remote collecting dust, it's like, we don't need it for the office. So, like,
Mhm.
it wasn't a lot of money. It was like $11 or something like that. And so you phone your cable provider, and they say, no, you owe the rest of the contract. And
Right.
it's like, okay, so we'll keep paying
Yes.
the $11, right? But you need to know exactly, you know what I mean? That, like I said, it's easy to get into, difficult to get out to. Make sure that you read what is said. And even if it's there, there's still room for negotiation.
Right.
Everything in life can be negotiated. You
Mhm.
just need to make sure that that the other person is accepting your negotiation, is that accepting the changes to the contract, and then that both parties are in agreement to what they're getting, which brings us to
And
consider it. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, to your point, there's also terms that would say, when can you cancel it? What
Yeah,
frustrates the contract? Who can leave? Who can back out of it, and under what circumstances?
that's right.
What's a force
What's an
majeure?
act of God?
As
I was
we
just thinking that.
Yes.
Yeah, what
Um,
constitutes an act of God,
and
right?
with COVID, which part of, we're seeing a lot of commercial leases, et cetera. Does COVID make it so that, and I'm seeing a lot of discussions on this,
Oh,
does
wow. Yeah.
COVID mean that, does it constitute a force majeure? And even if it does that mean that, for instance, a tenant doesn't have to owe their rent? Or does it mean that they just don't have to pay it right now? Right? So all these specifications need to be um, worded correctly in the
Yeah.
contracts, and you need to know what you're actually signing before you sign it.
And sometimes, it feels like, I know, as a woman business owner, right? Sometimes you feel a little self-conscious, going back and renegotiating a contract, especially when there's extenuating circumstances that are preventing the completion of it, or are preventing the execution of it from either party.
Mhm.
Sometimes you feel a little self-conscious, or you feel a little, I don't know, like a loser, if you have to go back and say, what, can you extend the terms, or can we renegotiate the price, or I'm not able to afford X, but can we cut the services in half, and I'm able to afford this, or, get creative. You know what I
Yes,
mean? Because everybody much rather you negotiate and you're truthful than you defaulting on it,
but
right?
also the contract defines whether these things constitute a
Hmm.
breach of the contract,
Hmm.
because you want to know what position whoever it is that's
Yeah.
doing, not paying or whatever it is.
Yeah.
What
And
does
right
that mean for
now we're
them? Does that
seeing
mean that the
so much.
contract is terminated? Does it mean that,
Mhm.
it's grounds for an extension? Does it, as you said, is it grounds for negotiation, or does it mean that, the landlord or the person on the other side, the service provider,
Mhm.
can take legal action, and you're in
Yeah.
default automatically, right? What constitutes default? What constitutes frustration? Those
Yeah.
those are those are key terms.
Absolutely. And sometimes bending's better than breaking. You know what I mean? Especially
Yes.
now. Like, I don't think there's one person on this planet that has not been affected in one way
Yes.
or another, right? So I
Hmm.
think everybody's really trying to, is clearly taking longer than we anticipated. We're still seeing, setbacks, and we're still seeing like we take one foot forward, two step back,
Yes.
and such. And we may still be 12 months away from, any kind of visible effect from vaccination or from any other kind of advancement that we have made to contain
Hmm.
it. So we're still negotiating. We're still not
Yes.
out of it, right? So
Hmm.
this is very important. So consideration. Who is paying for what?
That's right.
Who's paying what? Sorry. Can we
Hmm.
dive that into this is coming to mind when it comes to some challenges that I've witnessed when it
Hmm.
comes to people doing pro bono or contra work, meaning, I will do this for you, you do this for me, we don't exchange any money,
Hmm.
right? What does it mean, consideration, and how can we make it crystal clear for both parties?
Yes, and I've seen some tricky situations with this where people, for instance, start on a month-to-month basis with some sort of services and then are trying to turn into longer-term agreements with their
Mhm.
client or, like you said, website providers, IT consultants, things like that, where perhaps they're starting with their clients on a month-to-month, see how everybody's, happy and whatever, and the understanding is that it's going to move into a contractual relationship. So what
Mhm.
happens in between that period? Are you continuing on the month to month basis? And is that okay? What's included in that month to month? And is it the expectation that that's going to carry over into the contract, or is there going to be more that's provided for an extra fee, less that's provided? What's changing, right?
Yeah, there's
So,
what comes to mind. Sorry, what comes to mind is those negative opt-in contracts that were very popular for a little while, and they're still around. That is like 30 days free, and then it automatically turns into a contract if you don't call and cancel.
mhm.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
there's so many ways that you can literally find yourself entering into a contract without realizing it, especially
yes.
when it comes with those free opt-ins, that with those free samplings that
Mhm.
you were saying. How how do we even begin to address those?
I mean, at the end of the day, if you've opted into the 30 days free, then
Mm,
it's your responsibility to read what you're agreeing to,
that's right. Read
right?
the fine print.
Read the fine
Yes.
print. Read the fine print, even with the consideration, like we're speaking, the disbursements and stuff that you're just mentioning.
Mhm.
Which ones are included, which ones aren't. Is HSC going to be charged on them? Is
Oh
it not?
yeah,
Are they
just
going to be charged on
taxes.
a pass-through basis, or are they included with the monthly invoice? How is all of that going to be taken care of? And those standard contracts that you're saying that you can use for different clients and stuff, well, that's fine. And then you can have perhaps schedules that vary the actual work to be performed,
That's
right?
right. Another
Um,
thing that turns murky is if they've received any kind of bonuses, signing bonuses, or discounts. And then if for some reason there's a request for a refund, like what happens to those, right? You see it a
mhm.
lot if you buy something that includes shipping and then you return it and it's like, oh,
Yes,
the shipping's not being refunded,
right.
right? Like,
Yes.
so there's so many little nuances that
Mhm.
you really, and I know it's difficult to read, like it's not easy reading. Let's put it
That's right.
to you this way, right? Like I know for you it's second
Mhm.
nature, but for the rest of us it's just like like numbing, right? Like when you begin to read it. But it is so important that we do, right? It's
Yes.
money, it's money that you're committing yourself to. Is
Yes.
there anything else we need to touch on consideration?
No, but I think what you're saying is important. I mean, and part of the reason I'm here is to change how everybody sees lawyers.
Right.
We're here to be your partners on your,
You're my
you know,
first call.
on your on your growth and your
Mhm.
advancement and your future plans and stuff. It shouldn't be a scary thing to contact your lawyer, right?
Oh,
We want to
yeah.
be there so that we can prevent a lot of these things. People are weary of spending the money up front, but if spending that little bit of money and getting some solid and sound advice that you're going to appreciate, and some guidance into the next steps that you're taking that could possibly make sure that certain things are included or excluded to reflect, what you're hoping to accomplish with these agreements, then it's worth it, right?
Yeah.
And we've said this in a few of our discussions. Get ahead of your potential problems,
That's
right?
right. That's right. It'll
And
cost you
making sure that
less if
you
you're doing it
Mhm.
ahead of time.
It absolutely will. Make
Mhm.
sure that you make sure you understand. And if it is because it's complicated, or it's a long-term adventure, or whatever it is, when you're in doubt, give us a call. Give us a call. Let us
Absolutely.
let us walk you through, right?
And not all lawyers are created equal, just like not all of any kind of profession are created equal. I know your personal mandate is to champion and empower women. This is why we connected. This is why you're one of our mentor experts. This is why you're a certified, woman empowerment coach, is because you, like, as we, this new batch of women entrepreneurs, right? Whether it's by chance or
Mhm.
choice, there's so many women that are now beginning, thank God, to have their second hustle to begin to generate extra income. And perhaps they've
Yes.
never been entrepreneurs. You're in corporate and you want to start your own company as a passion project, which, hey,
Mhm.
listen, this is how powerful women today began 10 years ago. And look at where
Right.
we are, right? All over the world.
Yes.
So, like, you do need to have, a good accountant and a good lawyer that you call and you discuss, like,
Mhm.
for example, anytime I'm thinking of doing something, like, I usually just send you like one or two lines that say, hey, I'm thinking of doing this, right? And then usually you'll say, yes, I can do that. Do you have these? Let's have a 5-minute conversation, right? And
Mhm.
it's not always on the clock, like, because that opens the door. It's like, yes, this is something we can do. Let's do it. And then we begin to work on it. Or you may say, you know what? This is not something I deal with, but here's a trusted advisor that can help you with that. And this
Mhm.
is why it's so important to work with trusted advisors, because your
Yes.
legal fees grow fast, right? And it gets expensive fast if you're not having the right conversations. So
Mhm.
it's just like going to a doctor. You have to tell the truth. You have to give
Yes.
all the facts, because if you don't,
Yes.
though, that's when it's not as effective. You
Yes.
know what I
And
mean?
it's worth the investment, is what I want people
Oh,
to understand as
absolutely.
well, right? Because
Absolutely.
if you're starting your new launch product, whatever it is, you may not be seeing the benefits of it right away. And yes, these are costs that sometimes people have to incur before their venture actually takes off. But
But yeah,
it's
it's
important to
worth
do it
it.
right, you know?
Absolutely.
It's important
Absolutely.
to do it right and to make sure that you are protected, especially if it's something that you are not familiar with. You know, it's our job to say, hey, have you noticed this? Or did you pay attention to this? Or did you give some thought here? And if the answer is yes, yes, and yes, and it's not an issue, or it is an issue, or how do I put that down into paper? And then
Mhm.
we continue,
And
right?
you want someone that slows you down too, at
Yes.
times if needed, which goes back to competency.
Yeah.
Because there are, and again, I don't want to say there's good lawyers, bad lawyers. There's simply lawyers that get to know you, and they get to know your thought process, right? I
Mhm.
get to know you as a client, and like you said, they become advisors. Is
Mhm.
more, is beyond lawyer, right? Beyond transactions.
Yes.
But when the matter of competency, we all seem to take all these terms in a duality, in a black and white. It's either you're not of sane mind or you are of sane mind, right? But
Mhm.
really, competency could be mental stress.
Mhm.
Competency could be, like, I don't know, like being in a toxic circumstance that you just want to get out, and you want to get out fast, and that is, clouding your judgment, right?
Mhm.
So really, competency is about a clouded judgment, not so much a medical diagnosis.
It's a combination, right? There's capacity, but there's also, is there undue influence? Is there
Mm,
somebody that's pushing you here? Do you actually have the free will
that's right.
to enter into this agreement,
That's
right?
right.
If you don't, then these things can frustrate the contract, which means that it never,
Mhm.
if a contract is frustrated, either you're arguing that it never existed, or it cannot continue, or whatever it is, right? And it's not just frustration, but was there ever a contract in the
Yeah, that
first
you're
place,
that you're
right?
not that the parties are, that no one party is vulnerable to the other. that is
Exactly.
really not, if they're, I'm thinking, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but you see a lot of new Canadians and new immigrants into countries
Mhm.
taken advantage of because
Yes.
they don't understand the way we do business. They don't
Mhm.
understand how the laws work, how the rules work. And that almost goes back to competency. Literacy is competency. So if
Yes.
somebody doesn't understand what they're getting into, they are, not necessarily competent to enter into this agreement.
And it's beneficial to both parties
Mhm.
in that, in circumstances to have both parties consult with their lawyers, because then you're
That's
taking
right.
away that argument, if anything, right?
And you want to run
In
an
the event that
ethical business.
something falls apart or whatever, then if both parties have consulted with their lawyers and their lawyers have given them advice, then it's harder to argue, I didn't understand what I was signing,
Correct. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or it's not saying what I wanted to say.
Because
Because your
ignorance is
lawyer
not
should
a
be
defense in, at
right.
least in our country. You can't just say, "Oh, I didn't know," right? It's like,
Yes.
no, you need to do your part to educate yourself and to make sure that you are entering into these, knowing what you're doing and knowing what you're entering into.
Mhm.
Um,
And
wow.
knowing the difference between what's promised to you and what's actually written, right?
That's right. That's right. And language could be a barrier. Language can lead to not being able to be competent to enter into this agreement. Language
Mhm.
barriers. So,
Yes.
I could speak to you all day, and it's such a, like you said, we have to unlearn and relearn a relationship with lawyers, accountants,
Mhm.
bankers, insurance agents. It's like, they're not necessarily evils. Trust me, they
That's
are
right.
your best friends when they are engaged at the right time. Even after, they're your saving grace, right? But
Mhm.
when you do it at the right time, right, that's
Mhm.
when it's important. So, to get a hold of Marlene, here's our contact information. As mentioned, she's one of our women today's mentor experts, and absolutely 100% trusted advisor, and we're so proud to have you in our team of advisors. And we thank everyone for taking the time to educate yourself, and to really, empowerment begins with knowledge when applied. So thank you so much. And we will
Thank
see you
you.
tomorrow, Friday with David. Today was a little bit of a special show. So thank you so much. And we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.